and I hear the first officer call out, and then the first officer jumps on the radio and he screams, "Holy shit, it's the goat man!" And I mean, it just like everything went quiet, and I could hear the ringing in my ears, and I could feel my heart race, and so I hit my light and I went flying up there.
I've been told by some older people, elders, that you grab them and you hold them and you don't own them, but you hold them there until daylight. If you can hold them or pull them into the light, it destroys anything they have, any kind of power or anything they were trying to do to you. It'll destroy them.
This guy was like bouncing, like, you know, like how you see people kind of getting ready to jig, you know how they kind of bounce? Yeah, he was like that way. He was just kind of bouncing, and he was just kind of going back and forth on one foot to the other. And he just kind of turned sideways, and he turned back over to the other way, and he took off. Holy shit, he jumped in Wanda.
Welcome back. You're listening to Lodge Tales, and I'm your host, Rod Williamson. I'd like to encourage everybody once again to share your stories with me. I've been getting a lot more engagement since I've decided to go on TikTok and post previews of the episodes. So I've been getting a lot more feedback and engagement with different people, about these stories, and I think it's encouraging some folks to want to share more, which is good for me, in the sense that I want more stories out, following my little mission here of bringing our stories out to the world. I would like to thank everybody for tuning in and listening to us, especially the patrons. They really, really help the podcast go a long ways, and I appreciate each and every one of you. All the listeners I appreciate, and if you don't know how to become a member on Patreon, you just go to patreon.com, make yourself an account, and search for Lodge Tales. Then you go to the membership and select a tier. From what I understand, if you're one of my listeners said they couldn't become a member on one of the tiers. For some reason, I don't know why that is, but it wouldn't let me fix that because there's still members in that tier, so I couldn't just basically delete it, so it wouldn't throw that error code out to somebody. But anyways, you just go to the second one and subscribe there. So that's kind of how you do it to get the bonus episodes of Lodge Tales. When you become a member, you get one bonus episode a month. So after this episode here, the Patreon episode will be coming out, and that'll be coming out tomorrow, the day after this one here. So in this episode, I have my wife. She finally came on, and I had to do this one a little different. What I wanted to do was 2 parts, but I wanted to kind of keep them in order. But what I ended up doing was taking the second part and releasing that for everyone. This episode you're about to hear is for everyone. And we're going to make the first part of the interview the Patreon episode. So in this episode that we're doing tonight, we talk about UFOs and her experiences she's had with some of them. Also, she's had some time loss, and she talks about that. And it's weird because time loss has to do, it's always a part of those UFOs and whatever they are, the Star Nation, the Star People, whatever they do. I don't know what that is. But they do make people lose time. We talk about that haunted house in Browning that we used to live at. It's my dad's house. It used to be my grandpa's. It's a house that was built in the 60s, still there. I didn't know we were going to do this part, and I debated. I sat here and I thought about it, because my boy had a traumatic brain injury, and I didn't even think we were going to share that story, but there was a lot of interesting things that happened around that time, spiritual things, and my wife goes into them, so I just follow her lead, and we shared our story with my boy, and I was hesitant to share at first because I thought it was too personal, but at the same time I started thinking, well, what if other people went through this? What if this can help encourage people to keep their faith, their traditions? And I hope it does. So we shared that, and during that time, we talk about what my wife calls is an angel that visited her at that hospital. She doesn't know how else to call it, good spirit, whatever, but she used the word angel at first. While we're talking about this, another subject came up, which we refer to as traveling. Other people will refer to it as astral projection or anything, something like that. But where I'm from, on the Blackfeet Reservation, we just call it traveling. And we talk about that, kind of a lot about that. Then at the end, we start talking about her experiences, just some of them now, not all of them, just some of them, as she works as an assisted care provider at this facility. And the strange things that have happened on her shift. She works the night shift. I think they call it knock shift, but she works the night shift. And I wanted to have that on the podcast as well, because the last story she tells about this doctor, I think, is a really powerful story. And I think we'd all be better off if we've heard it. There's many other stories she has, and if you want to hear more, the beginning of our interview is on Patreon. It will be on Patreon after this. So again, I appreciate everybody for being here and listening to us talk and share our stories. Go check us out over on TikTok. We got previews of it. If you have people that haven't listened to the show, direct them toward TikTok. It's the same name, Lodge Tales, and they'll be able to listen to some of the previews of the shows. What I'm doing is putting out one preview a day until I'm all caught up with every episode. After that, I'll be putting out the previews as I record the episodes and edit them and get them published. So my wife is born on the Blackfeet Indian Reservation. She comes from a really traditional family called the Bullshoes. If anybody knows our tribe and is from Browning, you'll know who they are. And yeah, that's it. That's my wife. The most beautiful person in the world. And she likes me. How about that? So let's get into her stories. We're just cutting right into them. Alright, thank you.
I remember, let's see, how old was I? Mary Jonam had just gotten their house built. About 13 or 14. And for some reason, all the kids were sick. And I was the only one who went to the after school program that day. So I was the only one to get off of the late bus. It was like 6 p.m. bus. And it was late towards summer, so it was still daylight out, really warm. I got off the bus, and I thought somebody was going to be there to pick me up, but no one was there, so I just started walking. And I was used to walking all by myself. or with others. We all walked in a group most days, but I was by myself that day. My Auntie Mary Jo had just gotten her house built, and I remember walking past my Auntie Vi's and Uncle Shorty's house. I sat for a little bit on the bridge. I was like throwing rocks in the water. And then I was taking my time. It was a really nice day. And then I start walking up to the house, up to my grandpa's house. And I just got up to Mary Jo's house, and I heard like knocking on glass. And I looked over, and there was a person in her, let's see, it would have been Galena's bedroom window at the time. Or would that have been Galena? No, Galena's window was, or her bedroom was the very back bedroom. Would that have been, I don't know what bedroom that would have been, but it was facing the road. And it was the one right underneath the kitchen window, that window. And I remember stopping and looking at it, thinking, oh, and I was just going to wave, and then I stopped because when I start looking, it was a person, but they had their face smushed up against the window. And it was like their face was made of clay, and the like harder they pushed against the window, the flatter their face got. Until it was just like a pancake and just eyes and like all flat, and it was like really ugly, and I was so scared, and the dogs were like freaking out and barking, and I remember I ran all the way to my grandpa's house. I told my grandpa what I saw, and they went down there, and I think when Mary Jo got home from work, they didn't let any of those kids in that house. They brought them up to my grandma's, and we were sitting there. And when Mary Jo got home, she asked me, well, what did you see? And I explained it to her. And my grandpa's like, you need to clean that house out before you let your kids in there. And I remember when I cleaned their house out, because my family uses willow sticks. And they said those willow sticks were just breaking. They would just snap and break. He's like, and it was all downstairs in that room where I'd seen that thing where they would break. He said, did it say anything to you? My grandpa asked. I was like, no, it was inside the house. It knocked to get my attention. That's what got my attention. It was knocking on the window. I said, and I thought, oh, it's the kids. I was like, but when I looked and I was going to wave, I said, it wasn't the kids. It was like whatever that person was. I said, I don't even think anybody was home. They said the doors were all locked. So Mary Jo said nobody should have been in that house.
Jeez.
But that was just things along the creek were always like just random things that would happen to all of us. When we were having a family cookout, I think we had just branded that day or something. We were all at my grandpa's house, like how we all gathered, and there was a lot of us there. So we all saw it. But we saw something over my Auntie Cleo's house. Us kids were out on the back porch, and I remember Dustin being the one to tell everybody, hey, there's something in the sky. And it was flying like around the coulee at first, like going up and down the coulee kind of quick. And then it stopped, and it hovered over my Auntie Cleo's house. And nobody to this day knows what we saw, but it looked like, those kids are saying how it resembled like a hot dog. But now that I look at it, that thing at MSU, that noodle thing? It's silver, like kind of round. That's how it looked. It was silver. It was like almost iridescent. Like it moved a certain way. It like reflected.
Like a macaroni?
Yeah, but like how that thing looked over there, how they call it a noodle. Like it was weird, but yeah, that's what it looked like. And we all saw it. It was just probably less than a minute, and then it was just gone. And I remember they wouldn't let us kids play outside. After that, we had to all stay inside. But they went up there and there was nothing weird, nothing out of the ordinary. Cleo's house, all their animals were there. It was just weird. I don't even know what it was or what it was doing. But I think that was the first time we ever seen anything like that. And this was later on. We were coming from... Where were we coming from? The lake. We had just got done chasing cows. And it was me, my brother. There was a lot of us young kids. We were all on horses. And the older ones had gone ahead of us. But they had said, oh, you guys just missed it. But we think we saw it before they did. It went over us first and then went that way. But it was to me it reminded me of like a bird, like a metal bird. That's what it reminded me of. It had a weird shape, but it wasn't like a helicopter or a plane, and it was quiet, but you could feel it when it went through the air. It was like that, like whoosh, like the air moves when something goes through it. Mm-hmm. And we were on horses, and the air that hit us was warm. And it was just, it was low. It was low. And it flew above us. But what was weird is it didn't turn like how a car or airplanes have to turn to go in a direction. It like was straight and then like would slide over and then go like that. It didn't have to turn. It was like flew funny, yeah. Anyway, so it would have come from my Auntie Mary Jo's direction, because it went over us and then it went like that over the ridge, and then it would have gone up over towards my grandparents' house. But they all seen it, and they said the same thing. They said it was fast, and then it was what I saw was like from underneath was like it was just round, but it had like reminding me of a bird, because like I don't know how to, like a top. You know those toys? Mm-hmm. Like it had a weird little space between the bottom and top, and then it had like come out like a bird almost, and went like went sharp towards the front, but it was smooth. It's like real smooth, like really thin, and it was fast. Like it was.
How big was it?
Freaking huge. Oh my gosh, like bigger than a plane, like bigger. Let's see. Like maybe if it landed, it would have took up like half a football field.
Cool.
Like if I think about it, like just from where I was at, it looked big, but I imagine it was even bigger than that. But what I remember about it was no sound and the air underneath of it, because it was cool that day. But when it flew over us, the air got warm, like the air turned warm, like the breeze that hit us was warm. Yeah, it was.
Didn't make your horses act up or anything?
Yeah, they acted up.
Did they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were freaking out.
How about that other time you were telling me that you had some missing time kind of happened to you over by Missoula?
I was with there's a bunch of us. We were driving. It was college, and we were actually going to Missoula to drink at the bar. And there was supposed to be like this big thing going on, Mustang Sally's. Hey, I think that's what they called it. And we were going to Missoula, and what do they call it? Nine Pipe? Not, you know that like log house looking restaurant just right on side the road. It's like there's nothing, and then there's the restaurant, and there's nothing again.
Mm.
It's like almost by the bird reserve or whatever that's called. Everybody was pulling off there because there was something in the sky that night. And I wonder if Dustin probably remembers this, because we were like all got out of the car and we're like, oh my God, look at that. And it was just like a swirl, like an actual swirl in the sky. It was lit up like daylight, like actual daylight, but the swirl was green. And it got dark towards the middle. And, you know, to this day, I don't even know what that was. Or if I remember right, it was something in the news the next day that we had like a meteor come through or something come through our atmosphere. But if you were lucky enough to see it, that's what it would have looked like. So I was like, oh, is that what we seen last night? Because we were like trying to figure out what everybody will... Because there was like maybe 9 cars pulled off the side of the road when we pulled off. Mm-hmm. And we were looking at it and it was huge. I mean, it was so big that it just lit up the sky like day. And I thought that, you know, and then we were like, well, you know, should we turn it? Because we almost thought, you know, should we turn around? Like, this is kind of freaky. Mm-hmm. And then we thought, oh, let's just keep going. That's the last thing I remember. I come to. We didn't even start drinking or anything, so I was sober. We were just getting ready to drive. There was nothing like really wrong. Mm-hmm. But I come to and I was getting sick by a trash can in Missoula, like hours and hours later. I can't recall. That's the last thing I remember, was seeing that thing in the sky, talking to them, seeing how cool it was, and wondering what it was, and feeling kind of funny. But that was it. I was like, oh, let's go, you know. But that's my last memory. And then coming to, and I was trying so hard to remember. They were like, oh yeah, we got here, and they're like, you don't remember anything? I was like, I don't remember nothing. Like it really freaked me out. Until I don't know what happened, like why I don't remember anything. Just blank. That's the last thing I remember. Come to, I can tell you what happens when I come to from then on. But I don't know what happened in between. Dustin said I was with them. I didn't leave them. So they had eyes on me. I just don't remember any of it. And I wasn't drinking. So I don't know why I don't remember any of it.
Weird.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know what we saw. It makes me wonder, like, did any other people that night parked along the road, like anything weird happened to them, I wonder? Or if it was just us. Because if I remember right, Dustin said he got sick after that happened. We had to pull off somewhere before Missoula because he got really sick. So I don't know. Like,
but that thing was like basically shaped like a circle, but it was swirling green.
It was swirling, yeah. It was swirling inward, and it was green. Towards the center was dark, like a storm dark.
Yeah.
And on the outside was so bright, it was whitish, like a whitish color. And then around it was just lit up like daylight, like blue sky, like the sky was blue. The mountains were lit up. You could see everything. Didn't last long because then the lights start fading and it start going inward. So I don't know what we saw. But we weren't the only ones who saw it. Like, people were just watching it.
Did it fade into itself and kind of blink out of existence, or did it fly away?
I don't know, because I don't remember that. It was still there when where my memory cuts off is we're looking at it. It was shrinking. I mean, the colors are going into the, they were going inward. Mm-hmm. Like the brightness wasn't so bright anymore. And the brightness started to turn green, like a glowing green. So, yeah. So I was like, is that what it looks like when something comes into our atmosphere?
Whoa.
Or what did we see? Like, did we see something else?
Yeah.
You know, but it makes me wonder, like, what we saw that night. And the only ones who saw it were the people in the valley that night. I said it had just happened there where we were at.
I'd be curious to know if anybody else had that too. Like if they had time they can't account for.
Yeah, I've had some like crazy stories told to me. Like my Aunt Karen's not alive no more, but my mom knows that story really well, where she was leaving Browning and she called my Uncle Max, and my Uncle Max isn't alive either. Oh, but Caroline and Tammy are her daughters. But she was coming out of Browning, and where the C-store is now, she said they had just paved that road. Just newly paved it. She said it was just a fresh paved road. She's like, everybody is all excited because Star School had a paved road. She said before that it used to be gravel. She said, so we were all excited that we had gotten our road finally paved, and she said it cut the time in half too because you didn't have to go so slow on a gravel. She said, and I called and I told him, give me like 20-25 minutes to make it home. I'm at that turnoff where the C-store's at. Mm-hmm. She said, but back then it was just a turnoff, they called it, and it goes out to Star School. That's where she stopped and made a phone call. We had relatives that lived off of there. She was dropping groceries off, I think, or something. But she called Max and said, I'm leaving. I'm on my way home. So they were expecting her. And it was like hours and hours later, she never showed up. And they all started getting worried. She said because she turned down that road, and as she was driving, things started to disappear on her. She said she actually saw them just fading away. Like you said, fading out of existence. She said they just faded away. Like in front of her eyes, everything just disappeared. To where she was on a gravel road with no houses anywhere. Like there was no civilization there. But the road. She said, so that's all. She's like, I was scared. I was really freaking frightened and freaked out. But I thought if I just stay on this road, I know this road goes to Star School. Just stay on this road. She said, I stayed on that road for 25 minutes. And then she said she was driving. And she said she thinks she passed out while she was driving. And come to, and her car was parked funny or something on the side of the road, but she was at the bridge before you go into Star School. Mm-hmm. And it was dark, and they were all looking for her, and she doesn't remember it. So to them it was hours. To her, she said it had to have been about 25 minutes, the same amount of time. She said, I just don't know what happened. She's like, I don't know where I was. I don't know. She's like, I can't recall. After I start thinking about it, she's like, it would get fuzzier and fuzzier to where I couldn't even recall the things I had recalled before. She said, and it was just, she said, it almost, she's like, scared me so much that she said, I wanted to forget it. But Max was like, when we'd ask Max about it, we'd say, Uncle, tell us that. It must have bothered him too, because they looked for her for a long time. Even my mom and them, they remembered that. They're like, yeah, we don't know what the hell happened to this Karen. Like where she went, what she, saw. Well, I do know my grandpa did something for her, like took care of her in a traditional way. Mm-hmm. But I don't know what she saw. Like, I'm really curious. I wish I could ask her. Because we didn't hear about it until we were older, and they would talk about it. They would sit and visit, and then they would talk about it, but it was like kind of quiet. Yeah. And then when we got older, she passed away, so we couldn't ask her about it. And then I didn't really talk to my Uncle Max, but I should ask Caroline and Tammy about it and see what they remember, because I'm pretty sure there's more to the story than her just... because we couldn't find her. They said they couldn't find her along the road anywhere. But her version was she was driving that road. She didn't quit driving it, even though it was just gravel. She stayed on the road. Landscape stayed the same. She knew she was going towards Star School. It was just... nothing was there. She's like, it was the past. She'd been like taken into the past.
Whoa. That's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That time. Missing time. That's a... You know, it's happened to my mom before, too. It's happened to my brother. It's happened to you. It's happened to quite a few people that... It's a... I don't know what it is, but it is a thing. It does happen.
Yeah. I believe it. I mean, there's just too much. World's too big.
So... The next kind of, I guess, subject I would like to get on is my dad's house, the flood house in town. So, what comes to mind, the few stories that you remember about that place?
The man in the kitchen. That freaked me out. Or the toilet paper roll that hit Breezy that time and Punky. Okay, so... The man in the kitchen. That's the scariest of all the times I've ever been spooked in my life. That probably is on top because of he was intentionally trying to scare me, peeking at me like that. So we got into a fight and I was laying on the couch and you were in that room and I was just angry. Like I didn't want to talk to you or didn't want to speak to you. And I remember you had to come out of the room and I was mad. So I was like my back to the living room and my face into the couch. Mm-hmm. And I was trying to just sleep. And I remember there was a little... So my back was to the couch and the couch was against the wall where the living room window was. And that faced the kitchen, the entryway into the kitchen. By that entryway was the stove. Mm-hmm. So when the stove light was on, there was a little bit of light you could see. And I remember hearing like something being dragged across the kitchen floor. That's what it sounded like. Like how you drag like a load of laundry in a plastic bag, like that trash bag noise, but you're dragging it. Mm-hmm. And that's what made me turn around. Was like, what is that? Like, it's just us in here. What is that? And I remember rolling around and I was looking into the dark, like trying to focus my eyes and looking into, there was a little bit of light from that little kitchen light from the stove. But I was looking and I couldn't see anything like in the entryway. And then something caught my eye, like to my left. And it was fingers. And they were fingers, like, coming from the side of the stove. Mm-hmm. You know? And they were moving. Like, just moving. And then they would go back and disappear. And that's when I was, like, sat out. And I got stiff. And then I start moving around on that couch. I was thinking, did I just see that? Like... Oh my gosh, I was like, am I getting spooked? And that's the first thing I thought of. And I looked again. I don't know what made me look back there. But I looked again. And this time the fingers come back. But I was a face. I was like a man. And he was like peeking at me from the stove. And it wasn't like on his hands and knees peeking at me. Because the fingers were like weird and he was peeking at me from like lower to the ground. Like his head was below his hands. Yeah. And it was freaking me. And that's what scared me. That's what, when I got up and I ran into the room. And I was like, you know, Rod, I was like, something's out there. And you didn't believe me at first. Mm-hmm. And then we went out there. And when you flicked those kitchen lights on, all those cabinets and cupboards were open. Remember, they were like, everything was open. Mm-hmm. And those were closed. I know that. Those weren't open. So that just happened. And then there were other things. Wasn't there something else that happened?
No, that night, what happened was you came into that room and you didn't really say anything. You just came back and laid on that bed by me. And I was still mad. I still had fight in me. So I went in there and laid on the couch.
That's right.
Yeah. And you come out. My side of the story is when I was laying there, same thing, had my back to the kitchen. And I started feeling something there. I knew there was something there, but I was just going to ignore it because I was still too mad. Still upset about whatever we were fighting about. And I just laid there. But I thought to myself, well, if I get too freaked out, if I don't fall asleep in time, if I get too freaked out, I'll face it so I know if something's coming toward me, I'll be at least facing it. It's kind of the thought I had in my mind. But just then, as I still laying there, feeling that on my back, you come out and you stood by me and said, Rod, just please come to bed. And the sound in your voice, there was no more fight. You weren't. That made me snap out of it and want to protect you because I knew there was something wrong. And whatever we were fighting for didn't even matter at that point. I got up and I went in there with you. And you started telling me that there was a man peeking at you, and since I had that feeling, I knew there was something in there. That's when I got up with that smudge, and I chased it out of there. And when I went into that kitchen, well, we turned the lights on, all that stuff was there, but I went forward, because I knew it was in that kitchen. I don't know how else to say it, but I could feel it. It was right in front of me. But I couldn't see it, but I knew that feeling. I know that feeling. And it was right there. Anyways, I started pushing it, walking with that smudge and praying toward the kitchen further into it. And where it went, I could feel it. I don't know how else to describe it. It went out that corner. And that's where I stopped smudging, was at the corner. And I come back in and nothing happened that night after that.
Yeah, you got burnt.
That was the next morning.
Oh, was it?
I want to say that was maybe the next morning or a couple mornings after. I got up and I was walking into the bathroom, and I didn't just stumble, like trip. I was pushed. I got pushed into that furnace, and it burnt my skin off.
I remember your dad was like, just ignore it. If you ignore it, they'll leave you alone. And that's when we were like, I was like, Jimmy, do you get bothered? And he just said, I just ignore it. That's all he kept saying is, don't pay attention to it. But
he didn't like talking about him because they'd really bother him. They would sit in his room with him, and when he would drink, he would get so drunk he didn't even know they were fake, that they weren't real. He'd be drinking right with them. They're alcohol spirits, that's what's around that house. And they're really bad. All they want to do is take everything from you. Well, the way it was described to me too by one of my friends was they're kind of pitiful type spirits. They want you around them all the time. They're really pitiful, I guess. And anyways, but they are bad. They will take. They just take.
Like want attention.
Like they want to take everything from you. They want you. They want everything. They want you to be alone. They want you to lose everything. They want to see you, have you in despair with them. Take everything from you, your family, your house, all your belongings, all your loved ones. They want you alone and isolated and hurting.
And this was during Indian days. This was before we met. This was when Chase and Jim lived in the house. We used to all go up there when we just needed a place to visit, and we'd all hang out. We'd all head up to Chase and Jim's. Mm-hmm. And we were all sitting in there, and there was so many of us in that living room. There was 4 long couches and then some recliners. All the couches were full. We had kitchen chairs pulled in there. We were all visiting, and we were joking around. We were teasing those boys. They were sitting on the couch adjacent to the bathroom, and we were telling ghost stories, and we were all really getting into it. And just then, out of the blue, a roll of toilet paper come flying out of the bathroom and hit Punky in the head. And it rolled off and rolled into the middle of wherever we were all sitting there, and it rolled into the middle of all of us. And we were all looking. We all looked up at Punky, and then he was like looking into the bathroom, and he was like, neck was stretched like he was trying to look at something, and then he just jumped up. And then Breezy and them that were sitting by him, they didn't even know why he jumped. They just all moved with him, and we were all like on one side of the living room, like scared of that roll of toilet paper. But we were sitting there, and we closed the door. Or like, okay, nobody pay attention to it. Let's just not acknowledge it. We're just telling ghost stories. Maybe we should talk about something else, you know? So we were trying to change the subject, and it was like talking about the powwow and what we were going to do. I closed the bathroom door. I'm the one that got up, turned the light on. Nothing's in here. Closed the bathroom door. Okay, let's just like move on, you know? So we were all sitting there again. Well, the girls went to that side, but then Breezy was like, oh, I'll go sit, you know, like, I'll sit by you guys. He's like being all brave. And we were just visiting, and we were laughing. We were like really laughing at something. And the second roll of toilet paper come out, and this time hit Breezy. And oh man, at that time we just all jumped up and went into the kitchen. Because we were like, okay, I was like, I'm not closing that door this time. Like, somebody else has to do it. And this time it was like the first one was like a playful toss. No, this one come out and freaking beamed him in the head, like where his head went sideways. And it was like, holy cow. So we just jumped up and we all went in the kitchen, and like, yeah, well, we're going to head out, Tracy and Jim. They're like, no, we're going to go with you. So we just all left. You know, and there was nothing going on. We were just visiting, but things like that. Or when we had family gatherings there, and we used to tell Sarah and them, we'll go in Tracy and Jim's room, because they used to have your dad's bedroom. That used to be Tracy and Jim's room. We'll go in there and just hang out and play. But Sarah was just small. She was about 5. And she said, no, it's okay. No, Sarah, go play in that room. Like, take all your toys and go in there and you can play. And she's like, oh, and we're like, why don't you want to play in there, Sarah? And she's like, because that old lady, she doesn't like me putting my toys on the bed. She makes me take them off and play on the floor, or she like gets mad at me. And we're like, what? And she's like, yeah, there's an old lady in that room. And we were just like all quiet, and I'm like, when do you see her? Like, every time you guys make me go play in there alone, she's in there. And like, does she sit with you? Does she get mad at you? No, she just sits in there with me, but she doesn't like me putting things on the bed, or she gets mad. I was like, weird. I was like, okay, so we never let Sarah go back in that room. We'd let her play out in the kitchen or something.
That is crazy, because my grandma, that was their room. When that house was first built, it was after the flood, you know. And what was that, 64, 65, somewhere in there, that flood. That's when they built those houses. So it was built in the 60s, and that was their room, my grandma and grandpa's room. And she was, you know, she was in the army. She was really meticulous. Her bed was always made like a hotel bed every day. It's never unkept. Nothing was unkept around her. She was really a tidy, organized lady. And she was old school Blackfeet. You know how they're strict. Today we would say, oh, they're getting mad at us. No, they're just strict. They're making you behave. And she didn't like her bed messed up. Like, I couldn't go in there and just jump on her bed and, you know, I couldn't do that. She used to sit in there and play solitaire cards, like all day. Not all day, but when she was having break time, because right across from her room was her sewing room, where our room was. That was her sewing room. But right in there is where she would play cards on that bed. And I could go in there with her and sit on her lap, but the minute I start messing up, she would run me off. You know, she's not mean. She was the kindest old lady ever.
And that's what Sarah's like. We asked her if she was scary, and she's like, no. She just doesn't like... It was just like, I can't put anything on the bed. Can't play on the bed. Can't put my toys on the bed. Like, well, what if you try to sit on the bed? She's like, I can't even sit on the bed.
Yeah, that's how she was.
Yeah, so we're like, well, but when she's like, well, it's an old lady, we're just like, okay, well, you don't get to play there no more, sirs.
Yeah. I wonder if that could have been her stopping in to check on things, because, I fully believe she actually made it over and she's not stuck here.
I don't either.
Yeah.
Because when I moved in there with Tracy and Jim to help them with Haley, and I was in that room that I was in when we met. One night I was sleeping, and when you're in, like, between waking and sleeping, like, you still can't tell if you're dreaming or not. I thought I heard a woman come in my room. How I knew it was a woman? Because of how she smelled. She actually smelled like an old lady.
Yeah.
Like how my grandma smelled. Walked around my bedroom. I heard her stop at my dresser and go through my pictures and my jewelry. Then go to this dresser and kind of dig around on what was up on that dresser. And then by the window. And then walk back around and walk back out. And the reason it didn't scare me because of how she smelled. Like, it smelled like my grandma. So I was just like, oh, she's looking for something. Almost like my grandma. It was like really weird. But then when I thought about it and start waking up, I did wake myself up. I could still smell it. So I knew somebody had just come in that room. And when I looked, my things were moved on all of my dressers and on my stand. I don't put things how they were all moved. So I was like, and my pictures were laid out. My pictures were stacked in a neat pile. They were just laid out all over my dresser. Like someone looked through them.
Yeah, my grandma had her dresser was, like, again, all organized and meticulous. She had her perfumes stacked up it was weird. Well, it was like a mirror, but it had shelves on the side. And that's where all her stuff was stacked. She had her jewelry box. Just all her things were on that dresser. And it was always really organized up there. And you're saying, like, the same thing happened to me, but it was out into medicine after she passed in 86. And after that, I remember laying on that bed out there because I don't remember when the house was built out there in Temed, the new house. Well, their house after the flood was built out there, but I remember laying on the bed. My grandpa had tried to wake me up because he was going down to that, that church, that mission church. He really got into to follow and to go into church after my grandma died. I remember that he was there every Sunday. So anyways, he was leaving, or he had left, and I remember waking up, and it must have been around, 11 o'clock. Because I remember he was just getting ready to get back. I was thinking, my grandpa should be back pretty soon. And what woke me up was I smelled my grandma. I woke up and I smelled her, and I started looking around, like really looking for her because I knew she was there. And then I start crying. But I knew she was there. And I quit crying. Oh, this dog, he just keeps moaning and
tossing.
Yeah. Well, anyways, I smelt that. I got up. I start looking around. That's when I start kind of feeling bad missing her. But my grandpa came back, and I told him. I said, Grandpa, I think Grandma was here. Oh, what? Yeah, I think Grandma was here. I could smell her in this room. I could smell her. That's all he said. And he's kind of, got that look on his face, and like a serious look, and went in the kitchen. Yeah, that's one time I remember that too. Similar to what you're saying. And she has a smell like an old lady. Mm-hmm. That old lady perfume, you know?
Yeah. And my grandma still uses it, whatever it is.
I think that's
Avon. Like, it's Avon perfume.
I've always imagined it was just a bottle called Old Lady. And they all bought it. It smells the same.
But I remember talking to my grandpa, like, when things like that would happen. And he'd always tell, like, you hear a lot of ghost stories. He's like, you're always going to hear ghost stories. He's like, because of how traditional and how close we are to the spirit world. Like, we acknowledge it and we know it's there.
Mm-hmm.
He said in a lot of other cultures, some forgot it's there or don't even acknowledge it anymore. He said, but it is, and I often wonder, like, what? So, like, you have all these ghost stories, but what happened when I was in the hospital with hippie SWATs? Like, so he got hurt and he got flown to Denver, and we were in the ICU, children's ICU, and you know, there was like, it was sad. I mean, there were kids dying while we were there, and it puts you on edge. And it doesn't help that all the rooms are glass, so you see everything going on. It's like no privacy almost. You have to close your curtains, but then they don't like them closed because you're being monitored. So it's just like it's all open, you know, and it's sad. You could hear people crying, and it just was really stressful. And I remember being in there with hippie SWATs, and we had just gotten there, and the doctor saying, okay, the first 3 days, the first 72 hours, and the first 24 are crucial, but if he can make it 72 hours, then maybe he's out of the woods. We don't know, but that's a really good sign. And so I remember the first 24 hours were super stressful. I didn't eat. I didn't drink anything. My mind was just so worried about my boy, and I couldn't focus, and the doctors would come in and they talk to me and tell me all these things, and nothing was positive, you know. It was all real negative, and that went on for 2 days. And then the third night, I remember sitting there, and I remember just feeling hopeless and just like so stressed, and like I didn't know what to do. I couldn't help my boy. I was so scared we were gonna lose him. And then all the things they were saying had been kind of negative up to that point. And then I had a feeling that the doctors weren't even telling me the full scope of his injuries. Like, they were just telling me what I needed to know. And so I was getting frustrated at that point too. And then I remember I was sitting there, and it was raining outside, and it was at night, and I remember I was staring out the window, and a doctor came in, and real professional, you know, I need to take his vitals, I need to check this, I need to check that, just like all the doctors before. So I just kind of turned around, sat up, you know, watched him do his thing. And then he come over to my side of Ippy's bed, and he's like, how's mama doing? And I was just like, oh, you know, like, none of the doctors ever asked me that before, you know, like, because he told me, how are you doing? Like, you know, you're going through all this, and you've just been by his side, and you haven't left, and I'm just wondering, how are you doing? And I was like, I'm okay. I was like, I'm okay. I was like, I just want them to tell me if he's gonna be okay. Like, then I could relax. Then I could, like, he's like, you know, you need to eat. He's like, and you need to drink, because when he gets better, he's going to need you to be strong. And if you're not eating and you're not drinking, you're not staying strong, as in healthy, taking care of yourself. And we're in ICU. He said, and if you come down with even the slightest sneeze or cold, they're going to make you leave, and you aren't even going to be able to be in here with your boy. So you need to eat and drink something. And I never thought about that, you know, like not being there for Ippies. Like, I was like, oh my God, he's right, you know. He's like, I'll have the nurse bring you something in, or you can call and order something. He's like, but you have to take care of yourself. And then I was like, wait, I said, you just said when he gets better. And he looked at me, he's like, yeah, he's like, your son's gonna get better. He's gonna be fine. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, because they've been so careful about how they say it and what they say to me. They're not saying he's going to be better or he's going to make it or he's out of the wood. You're the first doctor to come to me and look me in the face and say he's going to be okay. I said, and I hope you're right. I hope you're not just saying that to make me feel better. He's like, oh, no. He's like, I would not say that. He's like, your son is going to be fine. He's going to, need a lot of things like rehab and tests to see what's going on in his brain. He said, but he's going to be okay. And I was like, oh. And so I was like, finally, like, oh God, finally somebody told me he's going to make it. And I remember just feeling like relief and where I just wanted to cry. Like, I just felt so thankful. And he walked into the bathroom and I thought he was going in there because, the doctors would wash their hands in there and then they would leave. Mm-hmm. I thought that's what he was going in to do. But what was funny was he closed the door. The other doctors didn't close the door, but he closed the door. And then just like a minute after he went into the bathroom, the nurse came in. And I remember I was sitting there and I was just like feeling relieved. And she's like, how are you doing? And I asked her, could I order something to eat? And she looked surprised because that was probably the first time I'd eaten like in 3 days while I was there. And she's like, oh yes, yeah, we got a 24-hour kitchen. She's like, you just tell me what you want and I'll get it ordered for you. And I kept glancing back at that door, waiting for him to come out. And he never did come out. And she started taking his vitals. And I was like, do you need to take those twice? And she's like, what do you mean? And I told her, the doctor just took those. Do you need to take them twice? And she's like, what doctor? And I told her, and I got up and I start walking towards the bathroom. And she just happened to be opening the bathroom because all of the sanitizing stuff were in there, like the gloves and stuff. And she was putting on gloves. And when she opened the door, it was empty. Like, and I didn't tell her anything. I just dropped it after that. Like, what? Yeah. But the doctor that came in was so kind. And he looked over Ippy so thoroughly. And he was so professional. I didn't know he wasn't a doctor until he didn't come out of the bathroom. And then I realized he was like, to me, he was like an angel. If I'd ever met an angel, saw an angel, that was the time. Because he was there to let me know Ippy was going to be okay. Mm-hmm. And by letting me know he was okay, I was able to like take care of myself for my boy. Because I didn't even realize at that point that I wasn't doing that. Mm-hmm. And then the next day, what happens? Ippy comes out of his coma. Ippy wakes up. He lets me know he's okay. He holds my hand. And it's just like everything that doctor said, how he said Ippy was going to wake up, Ippy woke up like that. Like it was just like too much of a coincidence. This bullet. But yeah, that was... And I tell my mom about that story all the time. Like, because my mom likes stories. She likes things with angels and, hearing things like that. And she's like, I think if you believe in angels or good spirits, because you got bad ones, there's got to, you got good ones. I was like, that was a good experience for me. It was soothing. I don't know how to explain it. Like, something I needed in that moment, and that doctor gave it to me. And then to realize it wasn't a doctor. Like, I know I talked to a ghost or a spirit that day, and a good one.
After his accident, so my boy, Ippy, he fell out the window and he hit the concrete and he got a traumatic brain injury. Well, our boy. and they had to get flown out. They flew him out to Denver Children's Hospital down there. But anyways, when he finally made it there, because they had to stop in Casper and do an emergency surgery, cut out a piece of his skull because his brain was swelling, and they had to relieve that strain on his brain. Then he made it to Denver, and they still didn't know if he was going to make it or not. Well, I was home. I was with the other kids. We just had our baby Rose, and Bree was pretty small yet, our oldest daughter, and he used to play. He used to play in the kitchen in this one spot. He would set his stuff up and he'd play there. He had a little Nintendo and I think a little tablet too he'd play around on. Well, at the time the news was still pretty grim. We didn't really know what direction it was going to go. He didn't wake up yet. They were still in the emergency part of it, the intensive care part of it. And I was talking to her, and all of a sudden she said she had to go because it wasn't looking good. And she hung up. I was really worried, so I was going to start praying. And just as I got up to light the smudge and call on all, my helpers I was just praying to to the Creator, to the good spirit, everything I could, and the game turned on by itself over there, and so did the tablet. I had everything off. There was only one kitchen light on, and I was laying on the couch. Everything was off, but it all turned on. There's no way it can turn on. Those things can't turn on like that. And it was at his spot. I got really scared. Thought, well, oh geez, my boy's here, and he's not down there. He needs to go back. His spirit's here. And it scared me because I thought he might, be passing away. So I really started praying. I smudged that whole area, and I was talking to him. Telling my boy, you gotta go back. Mom's waiting for you down there. You can't be here. You have to go back and be with Mom. You gotta go back, my boy. And I just praying. I just kept praying like that. Anyways, I get a call back later from her, an update, and she said that, well, his heart rate was going down, brain activity was going really low, but he come back out of it. And I really think at that time my boy was traveling. He came back here, whole state away, and he was, I don't know, but that really scared me that time. And there was a couple things like that happened around my boy's injury, that I didn't know we were going to be sharing his story, but it's one of those things that, it's hard to kind of relive, but we're really lucky to have him. We really got lucky. He got lucky.
But that comes into our beliefs,
mm-hmm.
our traditional beliefs, that we travel.
Yeah.
That we have ghosts, we have good ones and bad ones, but we also travel. Our spirits can travel.
Mm-hmm.
And we call those people travelers.
Yeah.
We know what they're called, we know what they are, and we know what they do. So, to us, those things aren't just, they're almost normal things to us, because we've been raised in it, in that type of culture and tradition. But when I try to explain that to some people, they don't understand it either. But what I told them is, when you said his heart was dropping, that was when we were on the phone, and he stiffened out like a board. His body got so cold. and then up until then he'd never done that. Like, in all the things that happened, that was new. And so that kind of freaked me out. And the doctors, they couldn't explain. They had no medical condition or terms to use to explain what was going on with Ippy, like at that moment. All they could tell me was his vitals were dropping. Like, you know, the rush of doctors just come in. And I called Verge. And Verge was like, get a hold of Rod and tell Rod to call him back. You guys need to call him back. So it's like instinctively, he knew what was going on, but we didn't. And he helped us. Like, it all kind of come together, but I wonder about that too. Like, Ippy traveled. Like,
He's done it since then too.
Mm-hmm.
He's done it.
And I my boy's nonverbal, and there are holy people that have told me, and even elders that have said that Ippy's, what did they tell me? He's like, oh, I can't remember that term they use it, but it's actually in our language too. But what it means is he's a miracle.
Mm.
He's our little warrior, and he's here to teach us things. But one of them said, maybe because of all the things he's seen and knows, that him being nonverbal, you know. And I often wonder about that because, you know, I watched a show on Netflix where these people have near-death experiences and they come back and they're angry that they come back because they don't want to come back. Mm-hmm. Okay, when Ippy came back, when we lost him and he come back, that's the only way I could describe it, was Ippy was mad. Ippy was mad that come back to this when there was something else. And he couldn't explain that to me. He couldn't verbalize that to me. But I knew it, like, just in my heart, in the pit of my stomach, instinct told me, like, he doesn't want to be here. That made me sad. As a mom, you know, like, being there with him, just seeing that struggle. And what changed it was when you guys showed up. Ippy smiled for the first time.
Yeah.
And then I just knew right then and there, okay, everything's going to be okay. It's all going to be okay. And then those birds would show up. Those hawks and eagles would show up in Ippy's window. Of all the places to come, you know, they would show up at his window, land outside of his window, where I was taking pictures and filming them. And, you know, it's just like, those are just signs to me, like, okay, it's gonna be okay. You know, like, we're gonna go home. Might be a long, long journey, but I told Ippy one day, my boy, we're gonna go home. You know, and I would call my Uncle Verge all the time and ask for prayers. And I still think to this day that all those people praying, because we had so many people praying for Ippy, that prayers are powerful. Yeah. I will never, ever not say they aren't, because of those things that we've been through. There are just some things like doctors can't explain, nurses can't explain, we can't explain, that just happen. Mm-hmm. And I think those come from our prayers, asking for help too, because they kept telling me, you know, he's not gonna make it. All I heard all the way to Denver until, and the things that happened, right? So when we landed, or when we lost Ippy twice in the airplane from Bozeman to Casper. It was stressful. That plane ride was so freaking stressful. But what I remember is they are saying, we're trying to get a hold of a doctor, a neurosurgeon in Casper, and we're having a hard time getting a hold of him because he needs to go through surgery like now. He's, you know, we don't know if he's going to make it to Denver. So our nearest place is Casper. Well, the neurosurgeon had just finished a surgery, was on his way, no, had got to the airport, was on his way going to the plane, going down that ramp into the plane when he got the phone call. And he could have kept going, but he didn't. He turned around. He, just put what he was doing down, and he just got off the airplane and came back to the hospital. And when we were getting out of the ambulance at the hospital, he was just getting out of his taxi. It was all perfect timing. Right up to the moment when they took him in, he's like, if we would have wasted even another second, because they said Ippy's blood clots were the size of tennis balls. Mm-hmm. That's how big they were that they took out of his brain, and that's why it was swelling, and why we had lost him was it because of those blood clots, and he was able to remove them, and so it stabilized him. His vitals, everything. So the ride from Casper to Denver was way more not as tense because we knew he was stabilized. We just had to get him to Denver where the specialty doctors were. And yeah, so I think about all that, and I do. I think if he's a miracle, and if he could talk, he'd probably have stories, of what he saw, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, I think that hospital too is special because there's people in there and the energy is just a healing place. But when we were talking, you wanted me to talk about where I work. You got healing places and then you got places of loss. And I work in one of those places, and that's a whole different ball game. The type of experiences that I deal with in my workplace are, I don't know. I imagine that I bet there are doctors and nurses who deal with weird stuff in the hospital. They got to. And you hear about all the things back home. Mm-hmm. I work in memory care. So I work with hospice. So end of life people who are, I'm a med tech, so I give the comfort care and comfort meds to the people who are on hospice. And, having that being around that kind of energy makes you notice things. Everybody that works memory care that I work with, even now, will say that we don't talk about it, but things happen. When they're big things, we'll talk about it. We're hey, does this happen to you here? Because I think we need to reassure ourselves, we're not the only ones getting bothered in there. But one night, probably the more disturbing thing I had happen was one night I thought I was chasing a resident. Because we have a red-haired resident in memory care. And this woman that I was chasing was red hair. But none of our memory care patients move fast. They're in walkers or wheelchairs or shuffle, barely walk. So for her to get down a hall, out of sight, and in a bedroom and jump in bed and put herself in pajamas and act like she's sleeping in the span of just a few minutes isn't possible. So that's how I knew that I wasn't I was chasing something else that night. And I felt it. I felt it once I got around that corner. It felt heavy, and all of a sudden, spooky. Mm-hmm. It didn't feel comforting anymore. I felt on edge. What just happened? What was that? I went, though, just because I am in memory care, I made sure every resident was okay. I made sure they were all breathing. They were all okay. And the redheaded resident I went to her room first because I was like, I'm just gonna make sure, like, just for my own peace of mind. Maybe messing with me, who knows, you know? Because she's one of the more independent memory care. Like, she dresses herself, she can eat, but she just has problems with her memory, not with her physical abilities. But I've never seen her run, you know, so I didn't think she would run away from me. But she was in bed, and that's why I say she was in pajamas. And when the woman I chased was in clothes, so like jeans, a sweater, red hair, but it looked like her, you know. So that's what confused me. So I was like, she couldn't have got in this room, ran down this hall, got in this room, changed herself that fast, and got into bed and be asleep like that. There's just no way. So I went and made sure everybody was okay and everything was fine. And I was just like, okay, just gonna like turn the lights on and leave it at that. And then about 2 months later, I lost one of the hospice residents. And he was one of the hospice residents that pretty much all the employees have bonded with. He was just one of those gentlemen who's really easy to get along with, real kind. And when he passed away, I think we all really felt it. But we were all sitting there and we were talking about him. And each resident has a pendant. And those pendants are connected to our system in the facility. So when they push the button on the pendant, it automatically goes to our alarm, our phones that everybody carries. And he had been passed away for about 3 days, I want to say. They had moved him out of his room. All his stuff was gone. His pendant had been deactivated. Yeah, like he was just gone. But this had been about 3 or 4 days after. We were all sitting in memory care and it was knock shift. And we got the alarm start going off. It was his pendant from his room. And you have to go to his pendant to clear it off. So we were like, who's going to his room to see what the heck? Because his pendant was left in there, but it was deactivated. So we're like, oh, let's all walk together. So 3 of us walked into his room. His pendant was in there and it wasn't even blinking red to show that it was being used. It was just going off on our phones. So we cleared it on our phones. We acknowledged it and we cleared it like we normally do. And then about not even 15-20 minutes after that, it goes off again. This time we go in his room, all his lights are on and all his drawers are open. Yeah. And his little radio's playing. His little radio that he played all the time. It's just really low, but it's playing. And so like little things like that are always happening. And I bet if you were to talk to anybody that worked in a assisted living, skilled facility, memory care, I think it's just the energy that's there, you know, because they're all kind of end of life, or you've had so many people pass away. And sometimes we've had residents pass away just hours or days within each other. In like a week, we've had like, I don't know, 5 or 6 people pass away. Like it's a constant stream of loss in that place. And I think there's just that energy there. I don't know what it is. And then weird things, like the weird things you can't explain. And people that are atheists and doctors and scientists, they all come there and they're all like, yeah, can't explain that, don't want to, you know, don't even want to think about it. So we're just gonna store it in the back and forget about it. You know, because they can't explain it. And I think it almost bothers them, some of those doctors that come there. Because there are will happen in like broad daylight, middle of the day things. So I'm like, yeah. And then like at night, no, that's why nobody will work knock. With me, I smudge when I go there and when I leave. Like I carry things, sweetgrass, when I'm in there, you know, because my grandma's told me how to cleanse myself when I leave there after somebody dies. On my watch, like that I have to handle, because I do have to handle their bodies and, you know, I like deal with their families and stuff. So she's just always telling me, you know, you don't want to carry that stuff home with you. Just cleanse yourself before you go home.
Because I remember you coming home one night being freaked out about a doll that this lady used to leave outside of her room.
Oh my gosh, that doll moved. It kept moving through the night, and I'm the only one on the floor. The only one on the floor. And it actually moved as I was walking towards it. Because I thought it's one of those dolls, like if you lay it down, its eyes closed, and you sit it up and its eyes open.
Mm-hmm.
And it was sitting up, but its eyes were closed. And I was like, look, getting close to it, and then it opened its eyes really slowly, and it put its arm down on its lap. In the chair it was sitting in, by her door. And that just, oh my gosh, yeah. And I was so bothered by it, and like, when I would go down that way, I would cover it up. I'd cover that doll up. And on my shift, I didn't want to look at it. Every night I would make it a point to go down there and turn it around or put it behind her other, because she's always decorating really cool things outside of her door. But that doll was always there. And you know what? Come to find out, that doll wasn't even hers.
What?
When she passed away, her family took everything, and that doll was still sitting outside of her room. And we were all like, why didn't they take the freaky doll? Because it didn't just happen with me. There are other people that say that doll moves. And we're like, why didn't they take the doll? And they're like, no, they said that wasn't her doll. And we're like, okay, that doll needs to go. So we threw the doll away.
Whoa.
Yeah. So we don't even know whose doll that was. And it was in front of her room the whole time she lived there. That's why we thought it was hers.
What if it shows back up?
It hasn't. Oh my God, I'd freak the... Oh my God, I would quit. I would quit, and I'd be like, bye. Oh, don't pay me enough to stay there. Or I'd just go to day shift.
Yeah.
You know, like I wouldn't want to work the night when it's just you on the floor. It's scary, it's quiet, you notice everything. But if I have more people on the floor with me, and like at night, I'm so glad when there's 5 people, when I have 5 girls with me. Because if one of us gets bothered, we all get bothered. You know, it's not just one of us.
Yeah.
And we all are there for each other. Like we're all very in sync with each other. We know the place now. And even the ones that don't believe, you know, they end up believing at some point, because it's just weird. I don't know what it is. Just the place you work in, I guess. And that building, we all talk about it. The building's fairly new. It's like 5 years old. But the amount of death that's been in there would make sense why, like, there's so much things that happen, or why just random weird things happen, because you can't explain a lot of them.
Yeah. Jeez, the other story you told me too is pretty freaky. When you said there's no way that your one client couldn't be right there in that window staring at you.
That was the redhead.
That was the same one?
Yeah, that's why I chased her. Oh, no, oh, okay. That's where, when I peeked up, she was in the window.
Yeah.
Okay. No, but the same happened with the redheaded. She was up in the window and turned really fast and start walking away. And I was like, oh no, one of them are up. Like, you know, because it wasn't even spooky at that point. It's like, oh geez, one of them woke up. I got to get him back to bed. But when she ran from me, I was like, what the hell? She just ran from me and cut the corner. So I took off after her. But when I cut the corner, gone.
Right.
Yeah, and it couldn't happen that fast. But this was different. So this one is bedbound.
Mm-hmm.
She can't even walk, really. I don't know how to say it. If she did walk, it was like at a shuffle.
Mm-hmm.
And it would have took her hours just to get down a hall. That's how her shuffle was. Like, just barely going, you know? Like snail pace. And I got up and I was like, so my office where I sit is glass on 3 different sides. So it's meant to give us visual sights of all the residents' rooms
Mm-hmm.
from the office, because it's memory care. So you're supposed to be able to put your eyesight on somebody,
Mm-hmm.
you know, or even their room anyway. So and the office is in the middle of memory care. So then you have like these L-shaped halls, little tiny halls around that go into the bigger halls where their rooms are.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so she would have had to go from my office. It's probably about 5 feet to the hall, and then probably about another 20 feet that hall, and then the big hall. There's like probably about 8 apartments that she would have had to go by. And there's just no way she could have done that. Like, no freaking way. That she could have stood in front of my office door window like that. Me get up and her back in her room in less than a minute, maybe a minute. She was in there. I don't know how she did it. I don't know how she did it. Like, that was her.
Mm-hmm.
I know I saw her. She was just staring right at me through the door window. And then she turned around and headed out. And I was like, oh, now I gotta, like, and that's the first thing I thought was, oh my God, it's gonna take me forever to get her back to her room. When I got out there, and it was like empty. Every hall I turned empty. And I'm like, what the heck? Where did she go? And so I was like, went straight to her apartment, and she was in there. And I was just like,
Was she awake?
Yeah, she was sitting at the edge of her bed. Her tennis shoes are always at the other side of the room, because that's always where we undress her. They're by her wheelchair, always on the side of her wheelchair up against the wall. She had her tennis shoes on, but she was in bed, and I do 2-hour checks on her, so I know she was in bed. And she's full assist. She cannot even get herself sitting up and sitting to the edge of the bed. There's no way she could have went over and got her shoes and put them on herself. Like, yeah.
Weird.
Like, it just, some things you just...
Does that stuff happen
often?
Yeah, does it happen a lot?
And I don't tell you guys about a lot of it, because I just, like, oh well.
Yeah.
But it's gotten to the point where we know, like, the people that have been there long kind of see, like, phases almost. Like, certain time of the year it's worse, or around certain deaths it's worse, or when one passes away they all go in threes. It's really weird. Like, you don't just lose one resident, they go in like groups. And then weird little things will happen in their passing. Just little things, but you know, the big things we all talk about because it's like really hard to ignore.
I imagine a lot of them are kind of... I guess this is what I always wonder. I wonder about those people that don't have a belief system in place about the afterlife or anything like that. I would think, you know, when you're getting close to that time, you're going to wonder. You're going to want to know. Do they ever ask you things like that? Are they ever afraid? And I mean, I know they're afraid. That kind of goes without saying, but I'm curious how do they act? What do they say? The ones that don't have those beliefs there.
So I took care of a doctor. He was like that, an atheist.
Mm-hmm.
But in his final moments, he was scared. He was scared, but he was like, I don't know how to put it, like, he was scared that this was it, I think. And he wished that there was something more. And when we would sit and talk, you know, because he knew I was really superstitious, and we talked about things all the time. Like, I would always challenge his science views with my spiritual views. Mm-hmm. He was really cool like that. I really enjoyed, and he was sharp. Like, he was a doctor in life, so his mind, he wasn't in memory care either. He was just in assisted living because of his physical. His mind was all there. His body was what was shutting down, was getting old. Mm-hmm. And so, but we would sit there and we would have like deep conversations where his science, you know, we'd get going with his science, and then we'd talk about like me growing up on the reservation and my spiritual beliefs. And towards the end, I do remember him getting really curious about what we thought happened after we died. Because his parents weren't American, but I want to say his mom was some kind of Italian religion, but it wasn't Catholic or Christian. It was like I've never heard it before, but she was from Italy, and then his dad was a Catholic. But growing up, he said he just had a scientific mind. It wasn't really, you know, like a religious mind, he said. Mm-hmm. But he said as a doctor, through his life, there were stories he would tell me that he said he couldn't explain. He couldn't chalk it up to science. It was one of those things where he's like, Western medicine and knowledge, it only goes so far before something else takes over. He's like, I know that's true. He's like, I've seen things I can't explain in operating room or in recoveries or with patients, or just, he's like, random things that don't jive with science. He's like, but he said, as I get closer to my own, he's like, death, he's like, I do wonder if there is something afterwards. And I told him, why would you not think there is? I was like, what's your whole explanation from that? You're gonna die and that's it, lights out, and that's it. He said, well, he's like, just the life I've lived. He's like, I've seen a few things that might, he's like, maybe persuade me to think otherwise. He's like, but my scientific and how I think just won't allow me to think like scientifically. How you gonna say, you know, we die? He's like, there's nothing left of us. I was like, but there is. And that's where we would always, our conversations would always get. But in the end, he was more like, tell me this story, Amber. Like, can you tell me that story about, you know, this or that? Or, but they were more like spiritual things. And I was like, can you let me know if you make it over there? This was after he passed away, because one of the caregivers that when he passed away, they were left with me, and she's like, should we say something like a prayer, or, you know, she's like, I know it's the doctor, but, you know, because she was really religious. She's like, I would feel better if we said like a small prayer. So I said, go ahead. So she said her small prayer, and then I just remember telling him, you know, when you get on that side, send me a sign that there is something, that you found it. And I just left it at that. And then it was like 4 weeks later, 4 or 5 weeks later, they had just moved somebody into his room. We'd lost his pendant. Couldn't find his pendant, like, anywhere. And I kept getting his pendant thing. And it was his pendant going off. And it would go to my phone. And I thought that was weird, because it'd been so long, you know, like, where did... And then his pendant... Okay, so his family cleaned his room out. The night he left, his pendant, when they put him in those bags that they take him out with, his pendant was in that bag. I don't know if it got, what is that called? Cremated with him. Mm-hmm. Because he said whatever is on him when they take him is what goes into the crematory with them. So I assumed his pendant got cremated. It ended up in my laptop bag.
What?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I still have it. I still have it to this day. I don't know what to do with it. I just think that was his sign saying I made it, Amber. You were right. So I have my own explanations. I don't know what someone else would think, but you know, I choose to be like, he just let me know he's okay.
You know, I've always been curious about, you know, because we have such a deep spiritual belief, and I've been curious about the other ones, that don't have that. Like, what? I can only imagine from my point of view, and
I think even if they don't have that religious belief, or even if they're atheists and they don't think, it doesn't matter because it's there, and they go to it anyway.
It's kind of what I'm getting at, the whole, there are no atheists in foxholes. When something really starts happening, boy, you're going to pray, you're going to find that spiritual
And even
side.
if they don't believe in a God or an afterlife, when they do pass on, like he did, right? He didn't believe in it, but how do you explain what happened afterwards? Mm-hmm. And me telling, you know, that was like my curiosity was just like, you were so set on thinking there's nothing out, but if there is, let me know, you know, show me you found it, that you're good. And to have that happen, that made me feel good. It made me actually laugh and smile when I found his pendant. I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, because I was there when it was put in there. I was the one who, like, you know, had to put the body in the bag that night with the coroner, me and the other girl, because that's like part of our job. If there's nobody there to help, we're the ones that do that, clean them off, we give them their last bath, make sure they're in the clothes that their families left. When they're that close, most families will pick out their clothes, so if they're not there, we dress them, and then that's what they're cremated in, or that's what they're buried in. So I mean, but I remember that being in there with him. And I don't think anybody took it out because it zipped up and they took him, you know? So I was like, there's just no explaining how. And I know it's his because he carved in his initials in his pendant so he wouldn't lose it. So, I mean, like, and he always had this little green sticker on him, and that green sticker was on it. So I was like, okay, he's good. That was my whole thing, was he's good.
Yep, that was my wife. It was Amber. And some of the strange things that have happened in her life. I'm really happy that she shared with us. It means a lot to me, and I'm glad to get this out. I know it's a long episode, but I think it needed to be put out like this. So, the patron episode is going to cover her experience with Bigfoot. Also her earliest paranormal experience, among other things. So, if you want to hear those stories, so just a little preview of her Bigfoot story. She was actually chased by one, and she goes into a detailed account of what happened during that time. I would encourage everyone to listen. It's a really good story, and I would love to put it out for everyone to listen to, but it just so happens that the next episode out needs to be a Patreon one in my little schedule here, so that's where you can find it. And thank you for being here. Thank you for wanting to listen. And until next time.